Hi, I'm Seamless, and today is Thursday, which means it's time for a new FL Basics tutorial. This one's going to be about the fruity Waveshaper. This guy. Yeah. And you may notice that there's like improved lighting on my face. You can actually see me, and that's not because I got lighting, it's because it's actually during the day, and there's sunlight coming in through my window. That's kind of fantastic. It's not something that happens very often. So let's get into this business. So what is the Waveshaper? Right off the bat, what it's for is for distortion. That's what's designed to do. But how it goes about doing that is actually pretty genius, and hence it's called it's called a Waveshaper because of the way that it shapes the wave. And to demonstrate this, I've created a sound and I have a limiter open after it. I have the Waveshaper first and then a limiter after, and this is so that we can see the transients. One of the wonderful things about how FL plugins tend to work is that there's usually a very, very visual aspect towards it. And so this helps to, understand what the sound's doing. In this particular instance, we are able to see the transients pretty straightforward. Let's see, where's the zoom option? This guy, right? Yeah, all right. So now we got big old transients. So by the default setting for the Waveshaper is we have this straight 45-degree line going all the way across. And this is in an out graph. So the bottom axis is in, and the vertical axis is out, in, out. And so what this line is saying right now is that for every one in, there is one out. This is your ratio. This is actually, it should be familiar to you if you're used to, using compressors, because that's what that means in terms of a ratio. For compression and stuff like that. And this actually works somewhat similar to a compressor. Like you're actually compressing the sound, except that there's no attack or release on the compression aspect, which is why it distorts. So that's what that happens. But like, why is it a Waveshaper? Why does it shape the wave? Well, because it's pretty obvious when we start doing this. So okay, first to make this very clear, I'm going to do something specific so we can see by this line that shows up when we play the sound that it peaks right over here, which hilariously doesn't actually give us a dB value, but through the limiter, we can see that it's about -5-ish, 5.5 dB, almost basically -6 dB, which is normal. So I'm gonna make a line. I'm gonna make a point here, and the reason I do that is because I want to this is max, and this is the rest of the actual input. I'm actually not on the straight line anymore, as you can see, but the effect that this angle has is not very pronounced. But then if I do something like this, suddenly you can hear that it distorts. But not only that, but you can look and actually kind of see that shape reflected in the resulting transient information. Hence, the wave is being shaped. And what this has done is that about half of the information, the dB level. So information that was at like -14 or 15 dB down here just got pushed up to -6 or -6 dB, which is halfway through there. That makes sense. Yeah, -6 dB. So that's what happened. So then now the ratio has been changed. So then here, what this graph is saying is that for every -15 dB input, it's actually going to be put out to -6 kind of deal. But then as it comes back down, it's actually going to be brought down again. We don't actually need to bring it down. We can bring this whole thing up. And it creates a DC offset. See, where's the center option? Right there. That should take care of that. So this is the remove DC offset option. And what a DC offset is when there's charge information. It has something to do with amplitude value, and if you do stuff like this, it makes it think that there's an output. And basically what it means is that it's like the speaker position, if you look at the oscillation of the waveform, it's always going to be at a positive value or a negative value, but a non-zero value. It's not going to move, so it's not going to actually create sound, but you see what ends up happening in the transient is basically that there's just always transient information. It's kind of weird, and you don't necessarily want that. So that's what the sensor does, is the remove DC offset option. And you'll find that there's an option for that in most things, in most plugins in general. I think there's one for FMA. There's some in Citrus for all the operators. There's even a plugin called the Fruity Center, which does exactly that for audio in general. So that's what that phenomenon was just then. I may have just had a very stupid description of what a DC offset even is. So I mean, you can Google that. And so now we have some serious distortion going on, and the wave, as you see, is basically never when there is audio, there is basically never going lower than 28% of all of that, which is like minus 15, like we said before. So that's what that's doing, and it's distorting because again, there's no attack or release time in the movement of the wave information of the amplitude, unlike a compressor. So that was a pretty extreme example, but you can use the Waveshaper to make some more gentle, saturated kind of effects. And also, the whole thing that we just did, that we just went through to show like what it does, is basically a very harsh version of transient shaping. I mean, this is what it's doing. It's shaping the wave, it's shaping the transients, it's transient shaping. It's just that usually when you think of something that's a transient shaper, it's generally a compressor. It's a kind of compression and in the way that it's applied. But this is distortion. This is what it's for. Yeah, so that is the basic concept of how this plugin does its job. What things do we have going on here? So we have the freeze editing option, which just means that you can't screw around with it anymore. We've got various options for state files loading and saving, reset, prepare for smooth editing, all this sort of stuff. And then we have all these various options, which will smooth like jagged points or whatever, create a sequence. This is actually the generic options for pretty much every line editor in FL, including in Harmor. You get this option too. This doesn't necessarily do good. It doesn't actually create a sequence because it's not a time-based line. It's not a time-based plugin. So this just creates this. If you want to see what that sounds like, that's what that sounds like. I might turn that down in post, but yeah. Complicated shapes like this. This is a pretty interesting example. See, what this is actually meaning is that as the wave travels through all these points, as the amplitude decreases or decreases, it's being shoved up and down and around the whole time. So that's what's up with that. Let's go to reset. Bam. All right. We have oversampling options, which has to do with aliasing and resampling, because this is another term that you should probably Google because I'm probably going to botch it horribly. But aliasing is when you have frequency information that goes above the Nyquist frequency. The Nyquist frequency is the theoretical highest frequency in whatever sampling you're using, whatever sample speed you're using, like 44.1. And Nyquist frequency is 22.05, I guess. And the reason that's important information, but when you have information that goes above that, if you don't have any kind of aliasing protection, it'll alias. And what aliasing is when instead of the frequencies going above it, it actually gets wrapped around and goes lower. And I don't actually know how to demonstrate the effect right now, but if I did, you'd be familiar with the sound. But oversampling is what stops that from being a thing, I think. Again, I should probably know these things, but it's not super important to the actual end result of the sound. So now let's talk about this thing here. So what this does is it engages unipolar or bipolar. Now, what unipolar is, the default version. First, let's talk about how it actually interprets like audio in terms of measurement. When you notice how I was trying to figure out the dB value by looking at the limiter and trying to see where it was. It's because this actually reads total like amplitude input. So in the way that it determines values, the very bottom is actually 0 dB, because my plus or minus dB kind of thing is a different sort of term than just actually saying, oh, there's audio, so what's the dB value? Like, you're not going to think of an airplane in terms of like minus dB at any point. and that sort of stuff. So when you hear like, oh, a concert is this many decibels, that sort of thing, this is what the Waveshaper is measuring it in. It's measuring it in just positive dB. So that's where 0 is, right? So bipolar mode measures positive and minus dB, but not in the way, again, not just another, not the same way as the compressor measures it. It measures it in terms of oscillation and positive or minus. So because when a wave oscillates, it goes positive, then minus, and then it stops. And the middle line is just, there's no value, so it's 0 dB. And so what this does is it shapes how the waveform behaves differently for positive or minus. And so this is what asymmetrical distortion is. So right here this is indicating that the distortion is being applied the same kind of distortion for positive and minus. And this is some kind of wacky weirdness. So point being is that when you're in bipolar mode, the top half it represents the positive oscillation, and the bottom half represents negative oscillation. And so then when you do when you are making changes to the top half or the bottom half, that will apply. I have the oversampling engaged. When you have the bipolar engaged, that's what it means, because it's taking into consideration positive and negative dB value, like audio information value, as it goes across the period of a waveform oscillation, versus a single pole mode, which is just all the information is positive, kind of thing. That's how it interprets it. Fun fact: when you have a shape that you made in single pole mode, when you switch over to bipolar mode, it'll create that shape in positive and negative. So like right here, like what we're looking at, this square is actually this square up here now. And so that's why this exact shape originally fit just here. So this is a copy, and then it also has the mirror image copy in the negative side, so that this setting and this setting are actually the same sound, the same setting, because it's being applied and uniformly to the positive and negative, which was happening in the first place as well. But now that we have it in the bipolar mode, we're able to make different changes to the negative or the positive oscillation. So that's what bipolar is for, and such. And then we have the pre, the mix, and the post. So the pre, this is pre-gain. What it is going into the plugin. So if I go back to reset and play it again, it can set it so that it's closer to up than it was before, because it's spends most of its time kind of low. And then mix is basically the wet value of this whole plugin, and then post is just how loud it is in general. Because as we demonstrated earlier, you can make some pretty fantastic fucking sounds that you might not necessarily want to be very loud. What I like to use the Waveshaper for in my sounds is for band splitting effects. Like, I don't use this to split bands, but I will put this on bands that I split. Like I'll make a low mid high, and then I'll put it on the high. I can use that as kind of a harmonic exciter. It's not actually a harmonic exciter, but it does sort of the same thing. When you distort the high frequencies, you get kind of more crystalline wash in your sound. That's just kind of an example of something you can do. The Waveshaper is not super duper intensely difficult to use. I want to draw attention to one cool thing though. Go to step editing, and we can click and drag points. That's what step editing does. Step editing is the same thing for all line editors. I want to make a video on line editors in FL, like how to use them and why they work, because it's present in pretty much everything that's in FL. Anyway, the whole description that we just had for how the Waveshaper works in terms of basically it shapes the wave, that's actually how Maximus works as well, which is actually why it's pretty impressive plugin. The difference is between Maximus and the Waveshaper is that the Maximus has attack and release values, which makes it not a distortion kind of thing, but it still works in the same way. Because again, we have this in-out graph, and then we don't have any kind of ratio values or whatever. We mess with the in-out graph. The default setting for the bands in-out graph is that it's a brick wall at 0 dB here. But then if you want, we could do what the Waveshaper does and make it like, so it's not doing anything at all. It's not compressing anything. But then I could put a point in the middle and then do this again, like we did before. And now this is more like the transient shaper that you're used to. But I don't want to talk about that because this will be its own tutorial one day. And many people will benefit from its knowledge and such. All right, I believe I've adequately covered how the Waveshaper works and how it does its business and what it's used for. At least what it can be used for. Because, as usual, when you have a plugin that's designed to do one thing, sometimes you can find it could do things it wasn't meant to do. And it's actually pretty good at it. Because the devs did not think it could be used for one thing, but turns out it can. Indeed. If you have any questions, let me know. And as usual, have a nice day. Oh yeah, I'll remind you that I'm doing a Patreon campaign, which I'll have a link in the description. This is kind of like Kickstarter. There's key differences. I have a description video about how things do its stuff, and also I have a written blurb about how it works. And but the key similarities between it and Kickstarter are that you basically are donating money to me, and there are donation rewards. So things like I will listen to a track of yours and review it, and all the way going up to I'll make you a track if you give me enough money. That kind of thing. So go ahead and give that a look if you please. Thank you. I also want to remind you that I'll be doing a live stream on Saturday at 6 p.m. EST minus 5 GMT, as I do every week. And tomorrow will be Friday, which means it'll be time for another How to Bass. And this one I'm going to like a lot because I'm going to put in it a track that I'm working on to show off the bass that I want to do. And that'll be fun. So yeah, I will see you then. If you have any questions about all of that, let me know. And as usual, have a nice day.